Okay, welcome back. We're going to have a little brief video lecture here about bone composition. So we've talked about these osseous tissues and the hard consistency of the extracellular matrix of osseous tissues. And so now we're going to talk a little bit more about what's in there. What do you have in that extracellular matrix within these osseous tissues? So we've already talked about the cells that you have present in bone, your osteogenic cells, osteoblasts, osteocytes. Osteoclasts, we'll be hearing more, especially about the osteoblasts and the osteoclasts as we move through this unit. Alright, so your osteoblasts, again, those are the very active cells that synthesize new bone, that lay down bone initially, and then your osteocytes will maintain that bone after bone has surrounded an osteoblast and closed it off. So the osteoblasts, when they're first going to lay down new bony tissues, they first secrete a substance called osteoid. So this is not hardened bone. This is a softer type of tissue that's made up of various organic molecules. It's an organic bone matrix. And so that contains a ground substance. We learned about that when we went over connective tissues in Unit 2. So that ground substance consists of the watery-based fluid that's located there, and then you have various proteins, glycoproteins. Glycoproteins are sugar protein combinations, and proteoglycans. That's another type of protein-sugar combination where you have lesser amounts of protein and lots of sugars attached to them, large carbohydrates attached. And what those types of molecules do, I kind of visualize it sort of like Jell-O. They bind water just like gelatin does in Jell-O, and it soaks up so much water and creates this thickened kind of semi-solid material. That's your ground substance in this osteoid. Then you've got lots of collagen fibers in there as well, and as we've talked about before, those provide tensile strength and flexibility to the tissue. So that's what you have first. You have this organic bone matrix that has not yet hardened, and those are the organic components of osseous tissues. Alright, and then you have the inorganic substances in there that actually mineralize the bone or give it its hard consistency. So this hard consistency comes from a type of mineral salt known as hydroxyapatite. I know that it's not a diet supplement. I know it kind of sounds like Hydroxycut that they have infomercials about on TV. And this is not that. It's not an appetite suppressant. Hydroxyapatite is a type of mineral salt which is composed mainly of their calcium ions, phosphate ions, and hydroxyl ions. Hydroxyl ions are an oxygen and a hydrogen, and together they have a negative charge. So you put these things together and you wind up with a substance called hydroxyapatite. Some people will just refer to these as calcium phosphate crystals, but they're actually built from these three different types of ions that get together. And this is an image I pulled off of the internet, which just shows you the arrangement. The blue and the yellow circle or spheres on there, those represent calcium ions. In orange, those are phosphorus atoms that are located in there, and in green, those are oxygen atoms that are located there within these crystals. So it's a very organized crystal type substance, and those things, they form ionic bonds with each other. These are ions. Calcium ions have a double positive charge. Phosphate ions are negatively charged, and so these things, the hydroxyl ions are negatively charged, so they all get together through those positive and negative charge attractions to form hydroxyapatite. So what happens is you have The osteoid, I'm sorry, the terminology gets real easy to misspeak with the terminology because so much of it sounds alike. Osteoid, that's the softer substance that contains the proteoglycans and the glycoproteins and your collagen fibers that gets deposited first. And that attracts calcium and phosphate and hydroxyl ions out of your body fluids. They're attracted to those osteoid substances, and eventually you get so many of those ions in the osteoid that the ions bond to each other and form these hydroxyapatite crystals, and that's when the bony tissue mineralizes, because these are also minerals. Calcium ions are a type of mineral. So you can say the tissues then have become calcified or mineralized. You'll see those different terms used. Ossified, that's another term you'll see. Tissues become ossified. They've converted over to bone. Lots of OS words in this particular unit. All right, so that was just a little bit more about the extracellular matrix composition of bone and what you have there. The next lecture, we're going to start talking about, well, how do your bones actually develop? And it's a pretty interesting story that starts in the womb and continues on through childhood and adolescence as your bones continue to grow. That'll actually be the subject of the next two video lectures as we move on here with the Chapter 6 information.